Hi, I'm Serena Paris, and I'm going to discuss historical criticism. I'm going to use my blackboard today and refer to it often because there's a lot of text to cover. The historical method attempts to uh, explore history. The use of the historical criticism was an important means of testing claims of truth. In other words, the historical method pursues truthful observation by others in the past. To apply the historical method, one must investigate, record, analyze, and interpret the events of the past. This does help us to understand our past, present, and future. The process of evaluating historical method was used to derive trustworthy data, and it is known as historical criticism. The steps of evaluating would be to collect adequate, accurate, and reliable data from a primary or secondary source concerning the problem or under investigation. Primary sources are original documents or eyewitness, oral or written testimonies, and this is the only solid basis for historical work. Now, we must criticize or analyze the data theologically, scientifically, and socially as well. The researcher also must establish genuineness using external or internal criticism. Now, to establish genuineness, one must look at the age or authorship of the document, authenticity by ink and paper, handwriting, language, the script of the document, and for internal authenticity, one must check the meaning and trustworthiness of the statements of the document. Finally, one can present all of these historical events thematically or topically or even chronologically. Okay, I want you to reflect on what I've covered for the historical method so far, and I want to apply that to Revelation 8 and 9, the trumpets. So let's start with trumpets 1 and 2. The first trumpet was World War I. And World War I was between 1914 and 1918. Now, during World War I, a third part of the trees and grass were burnt. And this military strategy was called the scorched earth policy. This policy allowed troops to burn the land, crops, and trees so that it was inhabitable for the enemy. There was no shelter, there was no food. World War I clearly describes or depicts a third of the land being burnt. On to the second trumpet. The second trumpet, John saw a great mountain burning in the midst of the sea. And that's one of the single most characteristic about World War II was the atom bomb that was dropped, atom bombs that were dropped by the United States on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. John describes this bomb as a great mountain burning in the midst of the sea, and the Japan is is surrounded by water. It's an island. Now there was one eyewitness whose name was William Lawrence. He was a reporter for the New York Times, and he described the atomic bomb, quote, as becoming a giant mountain of jumbled rainbows. Though John did not know about atom bombs, he did describe this scene clearly as a giant mountain in the midst of the sea, burning in the midst of the sea. In addition, roughly one-third of the ships were destroyed during the bombing of Pearl Harbor and Nagasaki. Now, Cleve A. Lawton, in his book Hiroshima, The Story of the First Bomb, says that a third part of the sea creatures were also destroyed. They died. So let's turn to trumpet number 3. Trumpet number 3 is an event called Wormwood, in other words known as Chernobyl. Now, Chernobyl is translated in English as Wormwood. So on August the 24th, 1986, one nuclear reactor melted, causing an explosion, and a rainstorm caused the radioactive material to be brought back down to the Earth's surface, flowing into the rivers and the seas, and Europe and Asia to this day, their water is tainted by this reaction. There's a book entitled The Truth About Chernobyl by Grigory Mavida. It states that Chernobyl was the worst nuclear disaster in history, killing an additional 2 million people by 2016. You also want to check out in your local library a video called Chernobyl, The Taste of Wormwood. Now on to trumpets 4 and 5. Trumpets 4 and 5 are the Persian Gulf War and also the Desert Storm. Desert Storm and the Gulf War though it started in the summer, it also was in the winter of 1991. Now, the Gulf War also was where the Americans gathered for war, and hence John's symbolism of the American eagle. Now, the Chicago Tribune in January 1990 posted a cartoon of an American eagle swooping down on top of dead bodies as Iraqi men dig mass graves to accommodate all of the dead bodies, quote unquote. The sun being darkened and the moon not giving light, referenced in Matthew 24:29, is a reference of the Persian Gulf War, where Saddam had lit 800 oil wells, creating a shroud of smoke, and the sun and moon could not penetrate that cloud of smoke. So the National Geographic in August of 1991 published an article called After the Storm by Thomas Y. Canby, saying this spilled oil in the Persian Gulf turned day into night. Now this is the front cover of the National Geographic, which shows the oil burning, and that's the backdrop as the camels are walking by. So also with that same trumpet, the fifth trumpet, John literally saw stars falling from heaven, but this describes the bombs falling in the sky. These are Scud missiles with that same war. And so Gregory Haynes wrote an article entitled, "It Looks Like Star Wars," as he gives an eyewitness account of the bombing that caused the city to shake. Now, also, there's the large helicopters or the large locusts that John saw. And you can see this helicopter looks like a locust. It has the bug eyes out here and, skinny legs and things that look like a locust. In John's day, he wouldn't know what a helicopter was. So this is what he's describing as a helicopter. I mean, as a locust, because that's what was in his day. But we know that in our day, when he's describing that he saw a face, the face of the helicopter pilot was sitting behind the copter window. And also when he described the hair of a woman, that's the propellers as they twirl around like a woman's hair flying in the wind. Also, the propeller holder is the crown right here, as you can see that on top of the woman's head. Now, the breastplate of iron, obviously, helicopters are made of iron. And this is what John saw. And John also said he heard horses stampeding. So if you look online, on the internet, you'll just type in horse stampede and listen to the sound bite of how a horse stampede sounds. It sounds just like an Apache helicopter. Both sounds can barely be differentiated from each other. And then Revelation 9:5 further tells us that the locusts or helicopters were given power to torment men for 5 months. Now, the Gulf War lasted 5 months. So on to trumpets, number 6 and 7. Trumpet 6 speaks of the 2 million man army. Former leader of China, Mao Zedong, boasted in his biography, this is a written biography, that China is the only nation capable of a 2 million man army. And that's by the year 2000. Revelation states that this nation, China, has fire, smoke, and brimstone issuing out of their mouth, and their tails are like unto serpents. Inside the book, The Dragon and the Bear, Inside China and Russia Today by Philip Short, is an interesting read on the population, army, and how it ties into Revelation 9. So when you do get a chance, you can Google that as well, dragon/lionhead, to see the celebrated Chinese New Year and how they have the dance of the half lion, half dragon. Now onto the River Euphrates. This is 2009 picture taken of River Euphrates, and it's dried up. The great River Euphrates is drying up, and that the way of the kings of the east might be prepared. That's Revelation 16 and 12. China is that nation to the far east, capable of this massive army. Now, historian Brent Indris says the sound of the seventh trumpet is Armageddon. And that's the winepress of the wrath of God. But we as apostolics need not worry, for we are in God's hands. It's good to know that these are wars, that they're proven in history, historically, even critically, by authors and historians that are proving the Word of God. These events and descriptions do match up with Revelation 8 and 9, and it makes it simpler to understand that it's not a mystery, that it's actual events and times that happen in history. But we as apostolics and believers in God have no worries. We are in God's hands. So I just want to thank you for joining me. And once again, this was a little bit on historical criticism.